I was sitting in that sterile hospital room, watching the machines keep my husband alive for one more hour, when my phone buzzed. It was my daughter, Jessica. Her voice was cold, businesslike, stripped of any emotion.
Mom, Daniel and I are leaving for Singapore next week. I've already sold your lake house and transferred Dad's vintage Mustang to our name. We needed the capital for Daniel's tech startup. I'll text you the details.
The line went dead before I could respond. 37 years of raising her, sacrificing everything. And this is how she said goodbye, like I was some business transaction she needed to close. But here's what my darling daughter didn't know. My name is Catherine Walsh. I'm 69 years old, and my husband James, lying in that hospital bed with 72 hours left to live, had spent the last decade preparing for exactly this moment. Let me take you back 6 months to when this all began to unravel. James and I had been married for 43 years. We met in college. He was studying architecture. I was in pre-law before dropping out to support his education. We built our life the old-fashioned way, sacrificing, saving, investing every spare dollar into real estate during the market crashes of the 80s and 90s. While our neighbors bought boats and took cruises, we lived in the same modest 3-bedroom house in Portland, driving used cars and clipping coupons. James had a vision. He'd buy distressed properties, renovate them himself on weekends, and flip them or rent them out. By the time he was 50, he owned 17 rental properties across 3 states. But we never lived like we were wealthy. That was James's philosophy. Rich people act poor so they can stay rich. Poor people act rich, and that's why they stay poor. Jessica was our only child, born after 4 devastating miscarriages that nearly destroyed me. She was our miracle, and God help me, we spoiled her. Not with money, James wouldn't allow that, but with attention, with time, with unconditional love. She became a marketing executive, married Daniel when she was 32. He worked in tech sales, always chasing the next big opportunity, always dressing better than he could afford. I should have seen the signs earlier. The way Daniel would casually ask James about his portfolio at family dinners. How Jessica started making comments about how we were sitting on assets that could be optimized. The subtle suggestions that we should downsize, liquidate, enjoy our retirement by giving them early access to their inheritance. Then came the diagnosis. Pancreatic cancer, stage 4, inoperable. 6 months, maybe 8 if the chemo worked. James took the news with the same stoic calm he'd shown his entire life. But that evening, he asked me to drive him to his lawyer's office. "Catherine," he said in the car, his hand trembling slightly as he held mine, "I've been preparing for this for years. Not the cancer specifically, but the possibility that something might happen to me before you. I need you to promise me something. Anything. Promise me you won't open the documents Thomas gives you until after Jessica shows you who she really is." I didn't understand then. "James, she's our daughter. She loves us." He smiled sadly. "I hope you're right. But just in case I'm right, promise me." I promised. The chemotherapy started immediately, but we all knew it was just buying time. Jessica visited twice a week those first 2 months, always with Daniel, always asking pointed questions about James's affairs and whether we had updated our estate plan. James would deflect, change the subject, ask about their lives. Then one Tuesday evening, everything shifted. Jessica came alone, sat at our kitchen table, and dropped the bomb. "Mom, Dad, Daniel, and I have an incredible opportunity. There's a startup in Singapore looking for investors and senior management. Daniel would be VP of sales for Southeast Asia. It's a chance to finally build real wealth, not just collect rent checks on rundown apartments." James, weak from that day's chemo session, asked quietly, "How much do you need?" $200,000 for the investor buy-in. Plus we'd need to liquidate some assets quickly to show financial stability for the visa process. I was thinking the lake house and maybe Dad's car collection. The lake house. The place James and I bought 30 years ago with our first real profit. Where Jessica learned to swim, where we celebrated every birthday and holiday, where James proposed we retire someday. "The house isn't for sale, sweetheart," I said gently. Jessica's expression hardened. "Mom, Dad's dying. Let's be realistic. What are you going to do with a huge property like that? You'll be alone. You'll need to downsize anyway. We're your only child. This money will come to us eventually. We're just asking to access it now when it can actually change our lives. James closed his eyes, but not before I saw the pain flicker across his face. Jessica, that house is your mother's security. After I'm gone. After you're gone, Mom will have Social Security and life insurance. She'll be fine. But Daniel and I are young enough that this money can compound, can actually build something significant. Don't you want us to be successful? I watched my husband's face crumble. Here was our daughter, his miracle baby, essentially telling him his death was inconvenient timing for her business plans. I'll think about it, James whispered. After she left, he cried for the first time since his diagnosis, not from physical pain, but from heartbreak. 2 weeks later, James went into hospice care. He had maybe a week left, the doctors said. Jessica visited once, stayed 20 minutes, spent 15 of them on her phone with Daniel discussing property valuations. On what would be his final night of consciousness, James squeezed my hand and whispered, "Thomas has everything you need. The documents are in my study, bottom drawer. File labeled garden supplies. Remember your promise, Catherine. Let her show you who she is first." He slipped into a coma the next morning, and that's when Jessica called with her cold, clinical announcement. She'd already forged my signature on the lake house deed transfer. She'd been given temporary power of attorney for helping with Dad's medical bills, which she'd secretly expanded to include property transfers. The Mustang collection, 5 vintage cars James had restored himself over decades, was already in Daniel's name, sold to a private collector for $180,000, far below their actual value. I sat in that hospital room, listening to the ventilator breathe for my dying husband, and realized James had been right. Our daughter had been waiting for him to become too weak to stop her. When I got home that night, after James passed away peacefully at 3:47 a.m. with me holding his hand, I went directly to his study. Bottom drawer, file labeled garden supplies. Inside were 3 sealed envelopes, numbered 1, 2, and 3, and a letter in James's handwriting. My dearest Catherine, if you're reading this, I'm gone, and I'm guessing Jessica has already made her move. I'm sorry I was right. I wanted to be wrong more than anything. But I spent the last 10 years preparing for this possibility, and I need you to trust me one final time. Open envelope number 1 immediately. Open number 2 after 1 month. Open number 3 only when you're ready to finish this. I love you forever. You were the best decision I ever made. James. My hand shook as I opened the first envelope. Inside were legal documents, bank statements, and a detailed letter explaining what James had been doing for the past decade. The 17 properties Jessica knew about? Those were the small ones, the obvious ones, worth maybe $2.3 million total. What she didn't know was that James had been using those properties as collateral to acquire commercial real estate through a series of LLCs registered in my name alone. I didn't own 17 properties. I owned 43, including the office building where Daniel's tech company leased their space, the apartment complex where Jessica and Daniel lived, a shopping plaza in downtown Portland, 2 parking structures, and a controlling interest in a small but profitable data center operation. Total value, $18.7 million. The letter continued. Jessica has no idea any of this exists. I kept it hidden because I wanted her to love us for who we were, not what we had. But I also knew that if I died first, she might see you as an obstacle to her inheritance rather than as her mother. The lake house deed she forged? It's worthless. You never legally owned it. I put it in a family trust 12 years ago that requires both our signatures notarized to transfer. Same with the cars. She's stolen nothing but photocopies and headaches. Now comes your choice, my love. You can reveal everything now, restore what she thinks she took, and hope she learns humility. Or you can let her believe she's won. Watch how she treats you when she thinks you're powerless, and teach her a lesson she'll never forget. The tools for both options are in envelope number 2. I trust your judgment completely. You were always the smart one. Jay. I sat in James's chair until sunrise, processing everything. Then I made my decision. I would let her believe she'd won. I would let her abandon me, ignore me, dismiss me, and I would watch exactly how low she'd go when she thought there were no consequences. The funeral was small. Jessica and Daniel showed up late, left early, spent most of the service checking their phones. At the reception at our house afterward, I overheard Jessica telling her friend, "Honestly, it's a relief. Mom's set up with Dad's life insurance and Social Security. She'll be fine in some senior apartment somewhere. Daniel and I can finally focus on our future without worrying about elderly parent drama." They left for Singapore 6 days later. Jessica called once from the airport. "Mom, we're boarding. The movers will come next week for the furniture from the lake house." I left instructions with them. "Don't try to stop the sale. It's already processed. I'll call when we're settled." She didn't call. For the next 3 weeks, I played my role perfectly. I moved into a small studio apartment, sold James's old pickup truck, started volunteering at the library. To everyone who knew us, I was the grieving widow barely scraping by after her daughter had robbed her blind. Jessica's friends would see me and offer sympathetic smiles. The neighbors whispered. Even the bank teller who'd known James for years looked at me with pity when I came in to deposit my Social Security check. But every evening, I'd return to my studio and open my laptop. There, I'd review the portfolio James had built. I'd read his notes on each property, his analysis of market trends, his careful documentation of every decision. And I'd plan. Envelope number 2 waited on my nightstand. James had told me to open it after 1 month. 28 days after his death, I broke the seal. Inside was a more detailed strategy, along with contact information for Thomas Waverly, the lawyer, and Marcus Chin, a property manager who'd been secretly handling the hidden portfolio for years. James's letter in this envelope was longer. "Catherine, if you're reading this on schedule, you've had a month to observe Jessica's behavior. You've seen how she treats you now that she thinks you're poor and powerless. Here's what I propose. It's time to let her experience real consequences, not as punishment, but as education. She needs to learn 3 lessons. First, that people are not assets to be managed and liquidated. Second, that integrity matters more than opportunity. Third, that the mother she abandoned was never as helpless as she assumed. Contact Thomas and Marcus. They'll help you execute the plan. But remember, the goal isn't revenge. It's teaching her to become the woman we raised her to be, not the person Daniel has helped her become. With all my love, Jay." The plan was brilliant, methodical, and perfectly timed. Step 1. Jessica and Daniel's apartment lease was up for renewal in 6 weeks. Marcus would send them a renewal notice with a 40% rent increase, just high enough to be shocking, but technically legal given market rates. They'd protest, threaten to move, and eventually discover that comparable apartments in their preferred area were either unavailable or even more expensive. Step 2. Daniel's office lease would not be renewed. The building's new owner wanted to renovate and raise rates beyond what a struggling startup could afford. They'd have to relocate or go fully remote, either option being expensive and disruptive during their crucial first year. Step 3. And this was the brilliant part, the data center James owned handled IT infrastructure for mid-sized companies, including, as it turned out, the very startup Daniel had joined in Singapore. A carefully timed service degradation due to infrastructure upgrades would cost them a major client pitch. Nothing illegal, nothing traceable, just bad luck and timing. I met with Thomas and Marcus at a downtown office I didn't know I owned. They'd been managing the hidden empire for years, following James's instructions to stay invisible, stay profitable, and wait for this moment. "Mrs. Walsh," Thomas said, spreading documents across the conference table, "everything is ready to execute. But I need to ask, are you certain about this approach? Jessica is still your daughter. There are simpler ways to resolve this." Simpler, yes, but would they teach her anything? Marcus, a sharp-dressed man in his 40s who'd clearly admired James, nodded slowly. "Your husband spent 10 years building this safety net. Not just the properties, but this exact situation. He knew someday you might need leverage to protect yourself or teach a difficult lesson. He trusted you'd know which was necessary." "Both," I said quietly. "I need to protect myself from being seen as an ATM, And Jessica needs to learn that integrity isn't negotiable. We executed the plan flawlessly. The first domino fell exactly on schedule. Jessica called me for the first time in 6 weeks, her voice tight with stress. "Mom, you won't believe what's happening. Our landlord is raising our rent by 40%. 40%. It's highway robbery. Daniel's been looking at other places, but everything decent is either taken or costs even more. We might have to move further out, which means longer commutes, and with Daniel trying to establish himself here." I made sympathetic noises while folding laundry in my studio apartment. "That's terrible, honey. Can you negotiate? The management company won't budge. They sent this corporate letter about market rate adjustments and property value optimization. It's so impersonal. We're not just numbers on a spreadsheet." The irony was lost on her completely. "I'm sorry you're going through this. I know how stressful money problems can be." There was a long pause. Then, "How are you managing, Mom? Are you okay in that little studio?" "I'm managing. The library keeps me busy. Mrs. Henderson next door shares her Sunday pot roast sometimes." Another pause. That's good. "Listen, I have to go. Daniel's calling. I'll try to call more often." She didn't. 3 weeks later, Daniel's office situation imploded. The building owner, me, though they didn't know it, declined to renew their lease, citing plans for major renovations. Their startup, already struggling with the data center issues that had cost them a key client, couldn't afford the disruption of relocating. This time when Jessica called, she was crying. "Mom, everything's falling apart. Daniel's company lost their biggest client because of some technical issues, and now they're losing their office space. The investors are getting nervous. Daniel's working 18-hour days trying to salvage everything, but it's like we're cursed. Nothing is going right. I'm so sorry, sweetheart. And the worst part is, we used all the money from selling your lake house and Dad's cars as our investor buy-in. We can't touch it without looking financially unstable to the other investors. We're living on Daniel's salary, trying to cover this insane rent, and now he might need to take a pay cut because the company's struggling." She was describing the exact financial stress she dismissed when I tried to explain why we couldn't just liquidate our assets for her convenience. But I said nothing. "Mom, I know this is going to sound terrible, but is there any way you could help us? Just a small loan. Maybe 10 or 15,000, just until Daniel's company stabilizes." My heart clenched. This was the moment. She was asking me, the mother she'd robbed and abandoned, to rescue her from the consequences of robbing and abandoning me. "Jessica, honey, I'm living on Social Security and James's small life insurance policy. I don't have that kind of money, but surely there's something. Could you take out a loan against—" "I don't know anything." "Against what? You took the lake house and the cars. This studio apartment is a rental. I don't have assets anymore, remember?" The silence on the other end was profound. "Right," she said finally, her voice small. "I'm sorry, Mom. I shouldn't have asked. That was selfish. It's okay, honey. I understand you're stressed." After she hung up, I sat in my studio apartment, which I owned in a building I owned, surrounded by a portfolio worth millions, and let myself cry. Not from sadness, but from the sheer exhaustion of watching my daughter struggle while knowing I could solve everything with one phone call. But James's voice echoed in my mind. She needs to learn that people aren't assets to be liquidated. 2 months after James's death, I opened envelope number 3. This letter was different. More personal, more emotional. "My darling Catherine, if you've come this far, you've watched our daughter face real consequences. You've heard her stress, her fear, her desperation. And I'm guessing your mother's heart is breaking, wanting to rescue her. I know this because I felt the same way every time she struggled as a child. But here's what I learned in my final months. Jessica never learned to struggle. We protected her from every hardship, solved every problem, cushioned every fall. We thought we were being good parents, but we were actually preventing her from developing the resilience she'd need as an adult. So we created someone who sees problems as things other people should solve for her. The final phase of the plan is the hardest, and you can stop here if you choose. But if you want to truly teach her, to give her the chance to become the woman she's capable of being, Then it's time for the revelation. Not as punishment, but as perspective. Thomas has prepared all the documents. The choice, as always, is yours. I love you. I'm proud of you. And I know whatever you decide will be right. James. I met with Thomas and Marcus the next morning. I want to bring her home, I said. I want her to see what she did, what she threw away, and who her mother really is. But I don't want to humiliate her. I want to educate her. Thomas nodded. Your husband anticipated this. He left very specific instructions for this scenario. The plan was simple but powerful. I would invite Jessica home, telling her I needed help sorting through James's remaining belongings. Once she arrived, I would show her everything, the properties, the portfolio, the fact that she never actually succeeded in stealing anything. But I would do it in a way that emphasized not what she'd lost, but what she'd risked losing through her choices. I called her that evening. Her voice when she answered was exhausted. Hi, Mom. Hello, sweetheart. How are you holding up? We're managing. Daniel's company is talking about pivoting their business model. It might work out. It's just been a really hard few months. Jessica, I need your help with something. I've been avoiding James's study, but I need to sort through his papers. I can't do it alone. Could you come home for a weekend? I'll pay for the flight. The pause told me she was calculating the cost of the trip versus the emotional labor versus her guilt about how she'd treated me. Mom, I don't know if we can afford the time away right now. Please, Jessica. I'm asking for one weekend. I know I'm not supposed to need you, but I do. Another pause. Okay, yes. Let me check with Daniel. Maybe next month. Thank you, honey. She arrived 3 weeks later on a Friday evening. I picked her up at the airport in a car she didn't recognize, a modest sedan, nothing flashy, registered to one of my LLCs. She'd lost weight, looked tired, older than her 37 years. We hugged in the arrivals area, and for a moment, she was just my daughter again. Not the woman who'd betrayed me, but the little girl who used to fall asleep on my lap during long car rides. Thanks for coming, I said. Of course, Mom. I'm sorry it took so long. Things have been... I know. Let's get you home. I drove her not to my studio apartment, but to the house James and I had lived in for 40 years. The house she assumed I'd have to sell. Mom, are you still living here? How can you afford? We'll talk about it inside. The house was exactly as she remembered it, because I'd never left. The studio apartment was just an address I used for mail, a prop in the play we'd been performing. Once inside, I made tea. We sat at the kitchen table where she'd done her homework as a child, where we'd celebrated her college acceptance, where she told us she was getting married. Jessica, before we sort through your father's things, there's something I need to show you. I placed the 3 envelopes on the table, along with a thick folder of documents. What is this? This is what your father spent the last 10 years of his life building. Not for himself, for me, because he knew that someday I might need protection from the person who was supposed to protect me. Her face paled. Mom, I don't understand. The lake house you sold? You didn't sell it. You sold a photocopy of a deed to a house that was in a family trust requiring both our signatures. The sale was void before it was processed. The buyers got their money back. The house is still mine. What? But the cars you transferred to Daniel's name? Same situation. They were in a trust. The private collector who bought them was actually our family attorney, following James's instructions to secure them and return them to the trust. Daniel has a check for $180,000 that will bounce if he tries to cash it. Jessica's hands started shaking. Mom, I can explain. I'm not finished. The apartment you're living in, I own the building. The office space Daniel lost, I own that building too. The data center issues that cost his company a client, I own a controlling interest in that data center. I spread the documents across the table. Property deeds, LLC registrations, bank statements, investment portfolios, 43 properties, $18.7 million in assets. Your father didn't leave me poor, Jessica. He left me wealthy. But more importantly, he left me protected from the daughter who saw his death as a business opportunity. She stood up, backing away from the table. You've been lying to me for months. watching me struggle, watching Daniel and me nearly lose everything. And you could have helped us at any time. Yes, that's cruel, Mom. That's unbelievably cruel. Is it? I stood to face her. Was it cruel of me to let you experience the consequences of your choices? Or was it cruel of you to forge my signature, steal property you had no right to, and abandon your grieving mother the week after your father died? Tears streamed down her face. I made a mistake. You made a choice. You chose to see me as an obstacle instead of as your mother. You chose to liquidate decades of family memories for startup capital. You chose to ignore my feelings, my security, my future, because Daniel convinced you that your opportunity was more important than my dignity. So this whole thing was what? Revenge? A lesson? You wanted to teach me a lesson. I wanted you to understand what you did. Not just to me, but to yourself. You threw away your relationship with your mother for money you didn't even need and property you never actually got. You damaged your integrity, your marriage, your peace of mind, all for nothing. She collapsed back into the chair, sobbing. What do you want from me? Do you want me to beg? To apologize? To grovel? I want you to understand that people aren't assets, Jessica. Your father and I aren't a balance sheet to be managed and liquidated. We were human beings who loved you unconditionally, and you treated us like a resource to be extracted. I know I did, and I hate myself for it. These past 3 months have been hell. Not just because of the money, but because I've had to live with what I did to you. Every night, I lie awake thinking about how I treated you when Dad was dying, how I abandoned you right after his funeral. I'm not proud of who I became. This was the moment I'd been waiting for. Not anger, not defensiveness, but genuine remorse. Then show me you've learned something. Show me you understand why this was wrong. She wiped her eyes. How? How do I prove that to you? You start by telling me the truth. All of it. Why did you really do this? Was it Daniel's idea? Was it your idea? What made you think this was acceptable? Jessica took a shaky breath. Daniel told me we needed to act fast, that opportunities don't wait for perfect timing. He said Dad was going to die anyway, that the money would come to us eventually. So why wait? He made it sound logical, like we were just being smart about resource allocation. And you believed him? I wanted to believe him because I wanted this life. The Singapore adventure, the startup success story, the chance to be more than just middle management in Portland. Dad always taught us to be ambitious, to build wealth, to invest wisely. I thought I was following his example. Your father taught you to build wealth through hard work and integrity, not by stealing from your dying parents. I know that now. God, Mom, I know that now. When everything started falling apart, the rent increase, the office problems, the client loss, Daniel said we were just having bad luck. But I started to think maybe it wasn't luck. Maybe it was karma. Maybe the universe was showing me what I deserved. It wasn't the universe, Jessica. It was me. And it wasn't about what you deserved. It was about teaching you what happens when you treat people as transactions. She looked at me with something between horror and awe. You orchestrated all of it? The rent, the office, the data center issues. Your father orchestrated it. Years ago, anticipating this exact situation, I just executed his plan. That's actually brilliant. And terrifying. And she laughed through her tears. Dad was always 10 steps ahead of everyone, wasn't he? He was, especially when it came to protecting the people he loved. Even from their own daughter. Especially from their own daughter. We sat in silence for several minutes. Then Jessica asked quietly, "What happens now? Do you want me out of your life? Is this goodbye? That depends on you." Your father's plan had multiple endings. The vengeful ending, where I reveal everything and cut you off completely. The merciful ending, where I forgive you immediately and pretend none of this happened. Or the educational ending, where you prove through actions, not words, that you've learned what you needed to learn. What would the educational ending look like? I pulled out one more document from the folder. Your father set up a trust in your name. It contains enough money to pay off Daniel's business debts and give you a fresh start. But accessing it requires 3 things. First, you have to work. Not just any job, but a job where you help people, where you see the human cost of financial decisions. Your father suggested you volunteer at a bankruptcy counseling center for at least 1 year. Second, you have to repair our relationship, not through grand gestures, but through consistent, genuine effort. Weekly calls, monthly visits, treating me like your mother instead of your ATM. Third, you have to demonstrate financial responsibility. Create a budget, stick to it, learn to live below your means, prove you understand the value of money earned versus money inherited. Jessica stared at the trust document. How much is in the trust? $500,000. Enough to solve your immediate problems and set you up for future success. But you don't get access until you've completed all 3 requirements. And the timeline is up to you. It could take a year. It could take 5 years. It could take forever if you don't follow through. And if I refuse, if I say this is manipulative and controlling, then you prove I was right to protect myself and we part ways. You keep whatever life you've built in Singapore, and I keep my life here. No animosity, no drama. Just 2 adults who learn they're not meant to be in each other's lives. She was quiet for a long time, turning the trust document over in her hands. I'll do it, she said finally. Not because I want the money, but because I want my mother back. These past 3 months, the worst part wasn't the financial stress. It was knowing I destroyed my relationship with the one person who'd always loved me unconditionally. I want to earn back your trust. I want to be worthy of being your daughter again. And that's when I knew James's plan had worked. Not because Jessica was agreeing to the terms, but because she understood why the terms existed. Then we start tomorrow, I said. Tonight, you sleep in your old room. Tomorrow, we sort through your father's study together. And then we figure out how to rebuild what was broken. She hugged me then, a real hug, not the obligatory embraces at the funeral or the perfunctory greeting at the airport. Thank you, Mom. Thank you for not giving up on me. That's what mothers do, honey. We never give up, even when you give us every reason to. That night, I lay in the bed I'd shared with James for 43 years, and I felt his presence more strongly than I had since his death. We did it, I whispered to the darkness. She's coming back. Not all the way yet, but she's coming back. And I swear I could hear his voice, warm and proud. I never doubted you, Catherine. Not for a second. The next 6 months were transformative. Jessica returned to Singapore, had a difficult conversation with Daniel, who, predictably, was less interested in the educational ending and more interested in immediate access to money, and made a choice that surprised me. She separated from him. Mom, I realized something, she told me during one of our weekly video calls. Daniel didn't make me do those terrible things, but he made it easier for me to justify them. He helped me convince myself that ambition justified cruelty, that opportunity excused betrayal. I need to figure out who I am without someone whispering those justifications in my ear. She moved back to Portland 2 months later, took a job at a nonprofit credit counseling center, and started the slow work of rebuilding her relationship with me. True to James's requirements, she called every week, visited twice a month, and slowly, painfully, learned to treat me as her mother rather than as a resource. One Sunday afternoon, about 8 months after our confrontation, we were at the lake house together. Jessica had asked if we could spend the day there, making new memories to replace the ones I tried to destroy. We were sitting on the dock, watching the sunset, when she said quietly, I understand now why Dad did what he did. Why he set up all those protections, all those lessons. He was teaching me that wealth isn't about having money. It's about having integrity. And that family isn't about what people can give you. It's about who they are when you have nothing to offer them. He would be proud of you, honey, for learning that lesson, for having the courage to change. I hope so. I hope wherever he is, he knows I finally get it. I took her hand. He knows, and he loves you. We both do. A year after James's death, on what would have been his 70th birthday, I took Jessica to Thomas's office and signed the papers releasing her trust fund. She'd fulfilled all 3 requirements, and more importantly, she'd become the person James and I had always hoped she'd become. Your father left you a letter, Thomas said, handing her a sealed envelope. He asked me to give it to you only if you completed the educational path. Jessica opened it with trembling hands and read aloud. My darling Jessica, if you're reading this, you've done something very few people manage. You've learned from your mistakes instead of making excuses for them. I'm proud of you, not because you're accessing this money, but because you've proven you don't need it. You've learned to work hard, to value relationships over resources, to treat people with dignity. That's true wealth. The money in this trust is yours to use however you see fit. Invest it, donate it, spend it on something meaningful. I trust your judgment now because you've earned that trust. Take care of your mother. She's stronger than she looks and smarter than you ever gave her credit for. And remember, people aren't assets. Love isn't a transaction. Family isn't a balance sheet. These are the lessons worth more than any inheritance. With all my love and pride, Dad. Jessica folded the letter carefully and looked at me. Mom, I want to do something with this money. Something that would make Dad proud. What did you have in mind? I want to start a financial literacy program for young adults, teaching them the things I had to learn the hard way. Budgeting, investing, understanding the difference between assets and liabilities. But more importantly, teaching them that integrity matters more than opportunity. I smiled. Your father would love that. And somewhere I knew he was smiling too. So here's what I want you to understand, whoever's listening to this story. Justice isn't always about punishment. Sometimes it's about education. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for someone is let them face the consequences of their choices. My daughter tried to steal my future while I was grieving my husband. And my husband, knowing this might happen, built an elaborate system to protect me while teaching her the lessons she needed to learn. Was it manipulative? Maybe. Was it cruel? Perhaps. But was it effective? Absolutely. Because now I have my daughter back. Not the entitled woman who saw me as an obstacle, but a mature adult who understands that love isn't something you can inherit or liquidate. It's something you earn through actions, through choices, through showing up even when it's hard. Jessica and I have dinner every Sunday now. Sometimes at the lake house, sometimes at the home she's rebuilding for herself. She's engaged to someone new, a teacher who values integrity over ambition, and they're talking about children. If I have kids, she told me recently, I'm going to tell them Grandpa James's story about how he taught his daughter the most important lesson of her life, even after he was gone. What lesson was that? I asked, even though I knew the answer. That true wealth isn't measured in properties or portfolios. It's measured in relationships built on respect, trust, and unconditional love. And that, my friends, is worth more than $18.7 million. That's worth everything.